So when I do these beginning Hebrew classes, I do get a variety of kinds of levels. Everyone, of course, is not reading fluently, or they wouldn't be taking this class. But some people come to the class with absolutely, they're interested in learning Hebrew, but have no past history with it. So I start from the very beginning for those who are that. Some people come as you have with, yeah, I sort of used to read, but don't anymore. Or a lot of confusions have grown in. And what I find is rather than trying to figure out which letters and which vowels you're confusing or not as strong with, it's easier actually to go back to the beginning and make sure everything is strong from the beginning. And also the method that I use to teach Hebrew is a little bit different from other methods that have been used. And so therefore, it's helpful to follow through this process. One of the things that I very strongly recommend is that you will learn it much better if you spend 20 minutes to a half an hour every day, rather than 1 hour or an hour and a half every week looking at it. So the idea of practicing it with consistency. The other thing is, as we go through, what I very strongly recommend is don't move on to even the next consonant or vowel until you're strong with the one that you have. So that being said, here we go. So the way that this is set up, and you'll notice actually that the way that I have the pages set up, there's a large, on one page, there's a large gap on the right-hand side. And then on the second page, there's a large gap on the left-hand side. The reason for that is these are designed to be printed out as 2 pages, and then the gaps line up. You can then poke holes in them, and they actually fit into a notebook. And when I did them live with students, I actually created the notebook. So therefore, you've got the room for the holes, and the holes are such that when you create your little notebook, it actually opens from right to left. So that being said, Hebrew is read from right to left. And of course, you already know that, but those who don't know any Hebrew and have not had any exposure to it, that's the first thing to point out. The second thing to point out is Hebrew originally was a consonantal alphabet. That is, in the Torah, only consonants are listed. There are no vowels. The vowels were added later. The consonants are these big kinds of things without dots, without any dots or dashes or anything, just the big things. The dots and the dashes were added many centuries later when Hebrew was formalized into a much more of a written process. The prayer books were written out, and Chumashim, that is the Torah with vowels, was written out. The other thing that when we get a little bit further is the original Hebrew was written without punctuation, without uppercase and lowercase letters, and without punctuation. So the letters are always the same. And when the Torah text is written, it's just word by word by word, and the punctuation and the division into chapters and verses and everything came later at the same time as they were putting in all of the vowels. So the way that this text works is the first big thing on the right is the consonant that you're learning. The English is the name of the consonant. And what you'll notice is in the name of the consonant, the first thing in the name of the consonant is the sound of the consonant. So you actually don't want to think of this as a bet or even as the letter B, but rather think of it as a symbol for the sound of B, the very first thing when you hear the name bet. Because what happens all too often when people are learning Hebrew and they learn Debbie Friedman's Aleph Bet song, or they try to transliterate what they're reading into English letters, is you then think of it in terms of English. And really you need to think of it more in terms of symbols that indicate a specific sound that you make. And in fact, the Hebrew word for letter, ot, is actually the word for a sign or a symbol. So when you see this, you want to think, and in order to get the b sound out, you need some sort of vowel attached to it, because otherwise you're just, and you have to get out of the b into something. So the first set of vowels that you are learning are these three vowels. One is a little T shape, one is a dash with two dots next to it, and they all have the same sound of ah. So and Hebrew is written syllabically. It's written consonant vowel or consonant vowel consonant. And you want to think consonant sound, vowel sound, and put them together. So you've had exposure in the past, so this isn't anything new for you, but for anyone for whom there's been no Hebrew awareness, that becomes in a sense, the hardest part of learning to read Hebrew is seeing the b, seeing the ah, and putting them together and making them ba. So if you think of it as the letter B, which all too often people do, you end up saying B-ah or something like that, or bet-ah. So just ba. So let Diane finish connecting. All right. Diane, you're there. We just started. So I was just doing the introduction to how Hebrew works. So the first line is not tough since your only choice is ba. But you can see it in a number of different ways. So it can be ba, or it can be ba, or it can be ba, or you can put it together into a consonant vowel followed by a consonant vowel, and it's ba ba. When you practice, at first it seems a little bit simple because you don't want to move on to the next thing until you can pretty much see the consonant, see the vowel, say in your mind the consonant vowel combination and say it out loud. So I very, very, very strongly discourage any Hebrew English writing. So don't transliterate this into BA or anything like that, but rather just look at it and say ba, ba. And you want to just get into the habit of seeing, thinking, saying, and that's becomes initially that's going to be slow, but as you get into the habit of seeing, thinking, saying, it's going to become faster and faster. So any questions on the bet or the ahs? Okay, so the next consonant is the resh. And again, the first sound that you hear is the er. So you don't think of it as an R, you think of it as an er. And again, to get out of the er, you've got to get into some vowel. And since you only know one vowel at this point, it's ra. So technically it's ra. But again, you're going to think think ah, put them together, say ra. And then the next, now I always give you review when I give you something new. So now you want to see, think, ba, say, ba. Then you want to see, think, ra, say, ra. And what you shouldn't do is get yourself to a point where you're going, ra, ra, putting it all together and then saying out loud, bara, and then taking some time thinking, rabba, and saying it ra, bara, rabba. Rather, what you want to do is you want to set yourself into a pace seeing, thinking, and saying. So you want to actually go ra, ba, ra, ba, ra. So you're on almost as if you had a metronome going. And don't worry if it's slow, because as you see it, think it, say it, it'll become faster and faster. So you don't want to go ra, ba, ra, ba, ra, but rather ra, ba, ra at that same pace all the way along. Don't be the kind of Hebrew student that I was when I was first learning, and therefore was never able to, I never allowed my students, whenever I taught Hebrew, to become that kind of student. That is, my Hebrew teachers, when I was in Hebrew school, were very predictable. They went around the room in the same order all the time. And so therefore, rather than listening to what other people were doing, I was practicing the line that I knew I was going to be called upon. And I would practice it the whole time. So when they got to me, I could zip through that line. Unfortunately, I never really at that point learned to read Hebrew well, because I didn't develop fluency, I developed showmanship. So you want to practice for fluency. And I always prevented that in live classes by never letting the students know who was going to be called on next. And one of the great things about Zoom is that you have no idea, because you don't know what order I see you on the screen. So that's the practicing. Any questions on the b, the r, or the ahs at this point? Okay, now we have another vowel, and this one is an oo, and it's this stick with the dot in the middle. And it's always going to be exactly like that. The ah, you remember, had 3 different ways it might appear, but it sounded the same. The oo has only one way that it's going to appear, and it always sounds the same. And unlike the ahs, which come under the consonant, the oo comes after the consonant. So whenever you see a consonant, you're always going to look for its vowel. The first thing you do is look underneath. If there's nothing underneath, then you're going to look after it. And so this one is, again, just boo and roo. So again, and what you again want to practice is don't go on to the next line until you can look at it and say boo, roo, ba. Again, at whatever pace you do it, you want to keep the pace consistent. And if you're stopping to think about the consonant sound symbol or the vowel sound symbol a little bit longer, then you slow your pace down for the whole line. You want to keep your pace consistent. And again, it's seeing, thinking, saying. See the consonant, see the vowel, think the consonant and vowel, say them together as one sound, consonant, vowel. That way, even when you get to a bigger word, you're seeing, thinking, saying ra, and here it's ra, boo, You're seeing consonant, vowel, and then consonant by itself. When the consonant has no vowel and it's going to be at the end of the word or at the end of the syllable, you just end with that sound. So you don't have to get off of it. So it's not rabu, but just rabur, and you end with the So ra, bu, is what you're seeing and thinking, and then eventually you're saying ra, bu, and just moving into that final sound. And then ruba and baru are you already know. Any questions on this line? Or are you following along and it's making sense? Making sense? Okay, now comes the final sticking point for many people without an awareness of Hebrew, and that is the and notice we don't have in English a way of representing the sound. So generally we do it as KH or CH. Linguistically, actually, it's an H with a dot under it. But it's not ch, but whenever you see the CH, it's always going to be. And notice the name of the letter is chaf. So the first sound you hear is final means that it's only at the end of a word. So it's never going to be at the beginning. And one of the things you have to do in Hebrew, as in English, is look for the little differences among the signs or symbols. For kids, it's seeing the difference between a B, which faces one way, and a D, which faces another way, or a B, which faces down, and a P, which faces up. So here, it's going to be the resh, which is rounded at the top and stops at the bottom of the line, and the final chaf, which is squared off at the top and goes below the line. And so that's going to be your first challenge, is to see things that look somewhat similar and see the difference. So again, you want to see the sound, think the sound, say the sound. Move on, see the sound, think the sound, say the sound. Here, see the sound, which is an ending sound. There's no vowel after it, and then say it. So when it's at the beginning, it's chaf, it comes out. When it's at the end, it's just. For those who don't have a familiarity with the sound, there are 3 ways of doing it that I found most common. One is the overemphasis and the whole body, and you can see people when they're learning the they put their whole body into getting that out there. The second way is to soften it until it becomes almost non-existent as, and then the third way is what it actually is, which is. So some will read the first one as barach, and you can see their whole body move into it, barach. They gotta get that out there. Some will do it so soft you don't even hear it, barach, and it's almost not there, or we'll do it even hardening it and go barak, but it's not a, it's a. So technically you really want to work for barach and just get that sound going. So before we move on, give you a chance to actually give it a whirl. So Hilda, how about the first word on the bottom line? I think
I'm muted.
Yep,
Barach.
yep.
Barach.
Yeah, exactly. Barach. Good. And everyone else, when someone else is reading, you want to be thinking it and seeing it and thinking it to yourself and seeing if it's what they're saying is what you would have said. All right.
Do you want me to do
Beverly, the next one? I think you're muted too. Yeah.
Rabach.
Okay, but notice there's another vowel at the end there.
Oh, so Rabacha?
Exactly, Rabacha. Perfect. Okay, and Diane, the next one. Make sure you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'm actually in your next class, but I just
Oh.
wanted to hear a
Oh, you were
review
just seeing how
myself.
I do
But
this.
but I'll participate.
No, that's fine. I didn't know if you were doing a little reviewing. Yeah, so give us the next one.
Okay, so which are we up to? I wasn't.
Third one.
Okay, Bach.
Right. So that's what you want to do is you want to go Ru Bach, and then the last word on at the end of every page is a real word.
Baruch.
So your first real word that you know is Baruch.
Baruch.
And again, it's you'll hear often people going Baruch because they can't get that, or they're doing Baruch, or they're doing Baruch, but it's Baruch. And at this point, we're not worrying about accents because it's you should be reading this line Barach, Rabacha,
Rabach.
Bach, Rubach, Baruch. And eventually, as you get more familiar with it, you're going to move on to Barach, Rabacha, Bach. So you want to pick up speed as you're familiar, as you're comfortable. So Beverly and Hilda, don't move on to page 2 until you feel that you can see, think, and say everything on page 1. Page 2. So now you notice the chaf at the end of the word looks like this. The chaf, when it's not at the end of the word, that foot got rounded off, that it goes now, instead of here going straight down, it goes all the way around. One of the things you'll notice also is sometimes letters have dots inside of them. Sometimes letters don't have dots inside of them. And the sound in some cases depends on whether there's a dot inside of it or not. So for example, the bet, you want to see it as this full shape with the dot. And the oo is, of course, the oo. The chaf, you'll notice, because it will become important later, is without a dot. So the chaf at the end of the word is the ending sound. The chaf, when it has a vowel, has to move off the into the vowel. So you want to just practice cha, chu, chabu, churu, bachu, chubu. Remember, you're seeing, thinking, saying. Eventually, it'll be chabu, churu, bachu, and chubur. And so your first, at the end of the line, your first stab at it will be chubur, and eventually it'll become chubur, where you have a consonant, vowel, consonant. Same thing, rubach, barchu, chubach. You just want to practice reading it that way. At this point, for this first lesson, I'm pretty much going to go through and demonstrate what you're doing. You're then going to have a week to practice it. And then next week, when we really get into it, you'll be reading for me. I'm going to give you a fair amount this first week, but you want to learn as much as you can learn comfortably during the week. My second week is always the time that I find out, are we going too fast, too slow, or just right? So you'll get all of the page. I'm going to go through all the pages that I sent you, but you're not necessarily expected to become fully facile with those pages, but rather, again, don't move to page 2 until you're comfortable with page 1. With some experience and background that you've had, you may move through the first 2 or 3 pages pretty quickly, and then suddenly you'll hit the consonant or vowel that was causing you a sticking point in your previous reading, and that will take a little more time. So after you've gotten comfortable with the chaf at the beginning, middle, or end of the word in its different forms, notice in the aleph, what's the first thing in the name of the letter aleph? You can keep yourselves unmuted and just call out. What's the first thing in the name of the letter?
Ah,
Nope, that's the second thing.
oh,
What's the first thing? First thing's an apostrophe.
oh, that's what that is. Okay.
It's some sort of non-letter symbol.
Uh-huh.
And it's what appears between the N and the T in can't and don't and won't and things like that. And the question is, how do you pronounce an apostrophe? And the answer, of course, is you don't. It's a space holder so that you can pronounce whatever is before it or after it. In English, it says, don't read can't, C-A-N-T, as a word, but read can't, C-A-N apostrophe T as a word. And so you're almost thinking Kent, and you're thinking pause between the N and the T, as opposed
March man.
Oh, sorry,
Or one
sorry.
to. So people often read the Aleph as a silent letter, but it's really not. Think of it more as, again, because then you're thinking in English when you say silent letter. If you're thinking it rather as a symbol to hold the space so that something else can be pronounced, then all you're doing is it's holding the space so that you can pronounce the vowel. And the reason, of course, for that is because in Hebrew, you need a consonant and a vowel combination. In general, and there will be a few exceptions, you can't have a consonant without a vowel except at the end of the word. And you can't have a vowel without a consonant except in one case at the beginning of the word. So in general, it's easy to say you can't have a consonant without a vowel. You can't have a vowel without a consonant. So if you want to pronounce a vowel, you need a consonant, but you don't want a consonant that says anything. You simply want a consonant that holds the space for the vowel. So this is just ah. This is the consonant, this is the vowel. You think, I'm waiting to see the vowel. I found the vowel. I say the vowel ah. And this is ah, and this is ah. And over here, and in the third word, you had a vowel, and then you had a consonant that said, I'm holding the space for the vowel. Here, it's simply holding the space for the vowel you already said. The reason for that is in the Torah, it would have been written with all of these consonants, but it would have pronounced chubah as if there was no consonant at the end. So again, you saw the vowel, you said the vowel, you saw the consonant, looked for the vowel, didn't find one, so you're done. Here it's cha'ur, and again, cha'ur. And it's not cha'u, but cha'u. You're thinking space because you have to divide the vowel from the vowel. In English, we blend vowels. We go ow and other kinds of things. In Hebrew, vowels don't get blended. They each have their own place. So this is cha'ur. When you're saying it fast, you may hear ow, but you're thinking space, and that's why it's seeing, thinking, saying. So cha'ur, you're thinking space. When you say it fast, it's going to be cha'ur, and you're thinking to yourself space. You won't necessarily hear that space from others when they're reading it, but you're seeing, thinking, saying space, cha'ur. And in the end, you have two ahs, so it's ah, and you have to pause and think space between the ahs. So it's which becomes faster, And the same thing here, cha'ah. You have to make the space between the ahs. Here, chu'ah, making the space between the u and the ah. And as you're doing this and as you're practicing, again, you may be going at the pace of abach, ar, hu. And notice here, ar, the resh doesn't have a vowel, so it ends that. It's ar, hu, not arihu, just ar, hu. And when you're saying it slowly, that's not a problem. When you go faster, you want to still think that pause rather than think a sound. So arhu, ha-aru, hu-ar, ba-hu-ar. And you'll notice even big words, if you get into the habit of seeing, thinking, saying, are just a matter of big word, longer seeing, thinking, saying as part of the word. When you're, eventually developing more fluency, abach, arhu, ha'aru, hu'ar, bahu'ar. You're becoming more words, but it's more words because you're seeing, thinking, saying faster. So again, practice the aleph lines before you move on to the next one. The taf, which has the sound of t, notice has no dot, has a dot, it's pronounced the same. A word about that. There are different dialects of Hebrew that developed over time. The most commonly known are the Ashkenazic or the Yiddish pronunciation, and the Sephardic, which is the way Hebrew is spoken in Israel today, was the Sephardic, the Middle Eastern, the Mediterranean pronunciation. So in the European pronunciation, they actually made a difference between the t without a dot and the t with a dot. In the Sephardic, in the Mediterranean, they did not make a difference between the t with a dot and the t without the dot. And the word that most commonly is known with that at the end is Shabbat, which in Sephardic is always Shabbat, but in Ashkenazic is Shabbos. And you can hear the difference between the t and the th. But I teach Sephardic, so because that's what's most commonly done in Reform and Conservative synagogues, and that's what's done in Israel. So that is the same whether there's a dot or not a dot. Other than that, it's the same practicing tar, boo. And again, big words are just broken up into little segments. Hu, ba, ta, and eventually tarbu, hu, ba, tach, ta'ur. Notice there's a pause. Atar, and so forth all the way through. This is R2, which if you knew one more letter, you would be able to follow with D2. Ta'aru, atat, and notice just end of the t. So the last line now is real words. And notice it's bar-hu, not baruch-hu, just bar-hu. So Baruch means blessed. Baruch means bless. In Hebrew, words, and so that's the only English you should be writing on your page is the translation, not the transliteration for helping yourself. So in Hebrew, words are built up out of 3 consonant roots in general. So the root is b, r, ch, and the vowels then change the way in which it's actually understood or the way it would be translated. So ba, b, r, ch is blessed and b, r, ch is blessed. The difference is barhu is the imperative plural and baruch is the adjective. So barhu is bless, y'all. Baruch is blessed. Something is blessed. Ata is not actually spelled correctly here because there's a letter you'll still need to spell it correctly, but it means you, masculine, singular. So Baruch Ata is blessed you, or you are blessed. So blessed you is literally the way Hebrew is written. Then notice now here, the bet doesn't have a consonant, a vowel under it. But you have to say the sound. So you say it with as short a vowel as you possibly can, which is b, just Just a little something, because you can't go boo, you got to get off the boo somewhere, so you go buh. And then you move on to the next consonant. So this is b, ru, ha. So not brew, because Hebrew doesn't blend, consonant doesn't blend vowels, but rather every consonant, every vowel gets its own way. So, and there will be eventually a little vowel here that will tell you only pronounce the consonant. So it's b, ru, ha, b, ru, ha. Again, reading it slowly for practice, you'll be reading bar, hu, ba, ru, a, ta, b, ru, ha, at. All right, any questions up to this point on page, through page 2?
I have
Yes,
a question.
okay.
I mean, when you were reading, I was trying to think of and I always get this confused, like on where it says Aleph, I was trying to think of the consonant and the vowel together. How do I not do that with that word that was like the one you just said, rucha? Like I would, if you hadn't mentioned that, I would probably say bar ucha, which I
Exactly.
don't want to. So like, how do I cash it?
Well, the first time you did it right.
Right? But if I forget, is there a trick? Is there a mnemonic of some sort?
Well, you just want to, with the Aleph, you're only looking for the vowel. Okay? With the consonant, you're looking for the vowel, and when you don't find one, you just do as short of a consonant as you can. So say it again the way you said it the first time, if you can. How would you read this next last word?
Okay. Ruha.
Exactly. Ruha. Not ba, but just b. As short as you can. Ruha.
All right.
Yes.
So the at is the masculine singular. Is
Actually, the ata is the masculine singular. The at is the feminine singular.
The at is the feminine singular.
And the ata is the masculine.
Okay.
But pretty soon you'll be able to see it the way it's really written correctly. So at this point, your 2 new words are, your old word from page 1 was Baruch. Your new word from page 2 is Barhu. Okay, the next thing you'll learn is a new vowel, and it's 3 dots, or it's 5 dots. And in the same way, remember that the 2 dots next to the line didn't change the sound. The 2 dots next to the don't change the sound. So it's no matter whether it's this way or that way. So here it's berech, et rach. Exactly. Now notice berech has the same root as barhu and baruch. It's the same 3 letters, 3 consonants. So therefore, this word should somehow be related to this word and to this word. The word berech, again, the vowels is what changes the meaning. The word berech actually means your knee. And baruch means blessed. Later, we'll get into the connection between knees and blessing. But that indicates that somehow in early Hebrew, there was a connection between the concept of blessing and the concept of your knee. But right now, you're just reading practice. And again, re, separate them because the Aleph says, give its vowel its due, re, and then Re'eb, and then hu. So re'eb hu.
Re-eb-hu.
Exactly. Re'eb hu. And you have to pause between the b and the th because you can't, in English, we don't work that way. But it's re'eb hu.
Re-eb-hu.
Right. Finish the b, move on to the ch.
Re-eb-hu.
And again, don't move on to the beginning of page 3 until you're comfortable with everything on page 2. How will you know you're comfortable with everything on page 2? One of the tricks that I use, because once you've been practicing this for 20 minutes every day, you're almost going to memorize the lines, is close your eyes, put your finger on the page, open your eyes, and read the word that you're looking at. Then if you have to look back at a previous reminder of what that letter or that vowel was, you need to practice that line more. And that will serve you in good stead moving forward. So don't move on past the beginning of page 3 until you're comfortable with everything with the lines. The next one is the hey. The first sound of it is the, don't think H, because H doesn't sound like an H. H sounds like an A, unless you're British and you say H. So you want to think, you're just breathing. And then you need a vowel to finish breathing. And so it becomes ha, ha,
Ha.
ooh.
Ha.
Now, sometimes the hey will appear with this little slash mark. That's an indicator in written text in the tradition that that's God's name. And the little slash mark tells you that you're dealing with an abbreviation. And so this is abbreviation for the word Hashem, which means the name. But when we're saying prayers, and we see God's name that we don't know how to pronounce, we say Adonai. For some people, traditionally, they don't say Adonai unless they are actually invoking God's name in a holy context in a prayer. And so when they're talking about God outside of prayers, they will say Hashem, which is what this stands for. So, for example, coming down to the third line, Bar Hu Et. Some people will then say Adonai. Some people, when they're practicing, will say Hashem. So that's up to you. Bar Hu Et Adonai, or which is the way you would do it whenever you're praying, or Bar Hu Et Hashem when you're practicing. That's completely up to the individual, whether they follow a more traditional or a more liberal approach. And then Baruch Atah Adonai. And now you have spelled correctly, Baruch Hu, bless Adonai, or Baruch Atah Adonai, blessed are you, Adonai. And here the Atah is spelled completely correctly. This is the masculine you, singular. The last line of this group, Baruch Haba. Again, taking it apart, Ba, Ru, Ha, Ba, nothing left, end. Literally, Baruch means blessed, as you know. Haba is the comes, or the one who is coming. This is what you see when you say to a, and this is masculine, blessed you, masculine person that is coming. This is the Hebrew way of saying welcome. Baruch haba. Blessed is the one who comes, masculine, or welcome to a male. And b'rucha haba, you're going to be doing slowly first until you get to b'rucha haba. And this is feminine. Blessed is the one who is coming. So Baruch haba, welcome to a male. Barucha haba'ah, welcome to a female. In Hebrew, everything is gendered. There's no neuter. Every noun, every adjective, every verb, everything is masculine or feminine, singular or plural. Questions up to this point? Okay, the next one is the lamed, and again, an old sound. There's nothing strange or new about it other than it's a new consonant. It's still going to be the la, ba, or the ru, lach, or again, here, l, just l, as short as you can to move on and get rid of that consonant. So licha, not lacha or licha or lecha, just l, just a l. Get out of the l into the next thing. Licha. The last word, hab to la. Again, you're just seeing hab to la. Okay, questions on page 3, which of course next week there may be indeed questions on all of these pages as you go back and try to practice. And again, don't move on to page 3 until you're fully comfortable with page 2. Don't move down the lines of page 3 until you're fully comfortable with the line. Moving on to page 4. Here you have that same stick that had a dot in the middle of it, which was U. Now the dot is above it and it's O. However, the dot can appear without the stick. So you could have toe like this, or you could have in the last word of the second line, notice the bet has a dot above it. It's still the O, so it's a, bo, tal. So again, when you see the consonant, you look below it for a vowel. There isn't one. You look after it for the vowel, the U or the O. There isn't one. You look above it for the dot. Ah, there is one. So it's O. And so now we have Baruch, Ata, Adonai, Eloha. Again, Eloha. Just breathing. You want to be able to read again, Baruch, Ata, Adonai, Eloha, Ha-El, Abo, Tal. If you're pausing in there and stopping and saying, what was that consonant again? What was that vowel again? I have to look back at a previous page or line to do it. Then you want to go back and practice that page or that line until you don't have to look back at it. When you can do that, you're ready to move on to the next one. And here you have A, 2 dots side by side. Remember, you already had which was 3 dots in a triangle. This is A, 2 dots, and this becomes a little tricky because sometimes in smaller print, it's hard to tell whether it was 2 dots or a line. So you're going to look carefully and see, is it 2 dots or a line? If it's a line, it was A. If it was 2 dots, it's A. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2 dots by itself like this, A, or 2 dots with the little thing up above it after it. That's all part of the vowel. So this is A, and this is Hey. They, and this is Ray, and this is Bay. So you're not really, you're not going to hear at this point a difference between this bay with the two dots by themselves and this bay with the little thing after it. So again, you just want to practice so that when you get to the last line, you can again read at whatever pace is your pace at that point. Baruch atah Adonai Elohei Abba Haba. Notice the difference between Abba and Haba. Just vowel with a little breath. Haba. Okay, and then the final thing is the nun, which you know from Hanukkah. It's the one side of the dreidel you don't want because nothing happens. It's not as bad as the side of the dreidel that has the shin or the pei, because then you lose. But the nun, again, is just the sound. So ha, na, ra, na, ha, lach, ba, na. And I don't have to translate that one for you, probably. The fourth word, what do you think it is? What do you think it means in English? Again, banana.
And
Banana.
it's the same word.
That's the same word. That's because there are no bananas in ancient Hebrew. So when they found them, they said, okay, we'll call it a banana. All right, so coming down to the end of the line, now you should be able to read, and it will be, if you know prayers, it suddenly becomes a lot more familiar. But the difference is now you're reading it, not saying it from memory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei.
Abba.
And again, what you don't want to do is you don't want to suddenly say, oh yeah, I know this one, Baruch atah Adonai. You really still want to be looking at it, seeing it, thinking it, saying it. So if you're reading this line as no hot, to ra, to rot. If you're reading that at that speed, then you should be reading this one at Baruch atah Adonai, and obviously hey slash, whether you say hey Hashem or Adonai, is going to be the same either way. You don't have to sound it out, you just say it. But you want to see the symbol, and see it, think it, say it, Adonai or Hashem. So again, you're not reading Baruch atah Adonai at that speed unless you're reading Hana, Ranana, Halach, Banana, Chalata, unless you're reading the rest of it at that speed. So keep even the prayers at the same speed as the rest of it. So next week, we'll see how you did, how far you got along towards page 4. I'll be able to better gauge. We'll see if some of the others who had originally signed up for it end up joining in. They will be sent the recording that we have done. So they'll get the recording so that, and they'll have an opportunity if anybody needs to be in touch with me, but we'll do review. We always begin the next session with a review of the previous session. I won't be sending you the pages for next week until right before, because I want you to spend your time not looking ahead, but going through those 2 pages, those 4 pages. So see how far you get, we'll see how you do, and then we'll know how much we need to move on at what kind of pace. But again, You're not moving on to a line until you're comfortable with the line you're doing, not moving on to a page till you're comfortable with the whole page. Don't worry about fluency is more important than speed. Speed will come as familiarity grows. This way, when you're reading prayers, you'll actually be reading them from seeing them, not just from memory. What this particular primer that I created does, it actually builds you in prayer fluency. So you learn the words of the prayers as you're accustomed to them. So Beverly, yes?
Will you send us the recording also? Because I like to practice with the recording.
Ferret always sends the recording out within a day or two after it's done. So
All right,
yes,
thank
the
you.
recording will be sent out to everybody on the list, not just to the two of you.
Thank you so much. That was great.
All right, any other questions at this point? We'll start with the questions for next time. All
Thank you.
right, recording stopped.